I spent 6 months planning that party, 6 months choosing every detail, every flower, every napkin. 40 years of marriage. 40 years waking up next to the same man, washing the same underwear, smiling for the same Christmas photos. I thought I deserved a celebration. The Naples mansion looked exactly as I had imagined that November night. White lilies in every corner. Ted's favorites, or at least that's what he said when we still talked about things like that. Candles floating in the pool. A 4-tier cake that cost $2,800 and that I personally ordered from the French bakery in Palm Beach, driving 2 hours just to taste the buttercream. Grace, my oldest daughter, had come from Bonita Springs with her husband. Lucas, my only son, finally showed up sober, or at least, he looked sober. And Lily, my youngest at 24, held my hand as we hid behind the $45,000 sofa that Ted bought without consulting me. "He's going to love it, Mom," Lily whispered. I squeezed her hand. My heart was beating so hard I could feel the pulse in my temples. 55 years old, and I still got nervous trying to please Theodore Crawford. The man I met at an architecture conference in Chicago when I was 23, and he was just a real estate broker with big dreams and a smile that made me forget I had a promising career as a teacher. I gave up everything for him. The classroom, the students. The master's degree I was pursuing at Ohio State. I gave it all up because Ted said he needed me by his side, that together we would build an empire. And we did. Or rather, he did. Crawford Realty Group, $380 million in commercial and residential properties spread across Florida. My contribution? Raising 3 children. Organizing dinners for investors, smiling in photographs, pretending not to see the messages on his phone at 2 a.m. It was 9:47 p.m. when we heard the automatic 8. Grace nudged me. Lucas straightened his tie. The same tie I bought him last Christmas, when he still called me, asking for money. Lily squeezed my hand tighter. "Quiet," I said. The front door opened. What happened in the next few seconds will stay etched in my memory until the day I die. It wasn't the fact that Ted was drunk. I had seen Ted drunk hundreds of times. It wasn't even the fact that he was laughing too loud. That laugh he reserved for when he wanted to impress someone. It was the fact that he wasn't alone. 2 women, 2 girls, actually. A blonde in a red dress so short I could see her underwear when she leaned over. Another brunette, more discreet, but with her hand on my husband's arm in a way that left no doubt. Surprise! The word left our mouths before our brains processed the scene. Lily was the first to scream. Grace stood up from her hiding spot behind the curtain. Lucas froze, his mouth open, and Ted looked at us as if we were a bunch of intruders who had broken into his house without permission. "Oh," he said. Just that. "Oh." The blonde in red giggled. The brunette took a step back, clearly uncomfortable, and I stood there, frozen, with the wedding photo album in my hands. The album I had assembled over 6 months, gluing each photo by hand, writing captions in cursive calligraphy, reliving every moment of our 40 years together. "What are you doing here?" Ted asked, his voice slurred. "Dad." Grace started. "I asked what you're doing in my house." Lily let go of my hand. I felt the cold of the air conditioning for the first time. 68 degrees Fahrenheit, always 68 degrees. Because Ted liked it that way, and what Ted wanted, Ted got. "It's our wedding anniversary, Ted," I said. My voice came out firmer than I expected. 40 years. I prepared a surprise party. He looked around. The white lilies, the candles, the $2,800 cake gleaming on the dining table. And then he laughed. Not a laugh of joy. A laugh of contempt. "The circus arrived before me," he said. The blonde in red laughed along. The brunette remained silent, her eyes fixed on the travertine marble floor. "Who are these women?" Lucas asked, finally finding his voice. "Friends," Ted replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Megan and Crystal, we were at a charity event in Miami." "Charity event." Grace repeated the words as if she were tasting them. "At 10 at night, with 2. She didn't finish the sentence. "With 2 what, Grace?" Ted took a step toward our daughter. "Finish the sentence. Go on, finish it." I stepped between them. 32 years raising this girl, and now she was standing there, trembling, facing her own father. The photo album was still in my hands. 40 years of memories. 40 years of lies. "Ted," I said, "send them away. Please, let's talk as a family." He looked at me, and in that look I saw everything I had ignored for decades. The contempt, the indifference, the absolute certainty that I was disposable. "You don't give orders here, Olivia," he said. "This house is mine, this money is mine. These," he pointed at the two women, "are my guests, and you are intruders." The album slipped from my hands. It fell on the marble floor with a dull thud. The photos scattered. Our wedding in 1984, Grace's birth, the vacations in Aspen, Christmas 2019 when Ted gave me a diamond necklace and I thought maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. Lily bent down to pick up the photos. Ted stepped on one of them, the photo of our kiss at the altar, and he walked toward the bar. "Anyone want whiskey?" he asked, as if nothing had happened. The fight that followed was the worst in Crawford family history. Lucas screamed things I never thought I would hear from my son. Grace cried. And Grace never cried, not even when she broke her arm at 8 years old. Lily stayed silent, picking up the photos from the floor one by one while the world crumbled around her. And the two women? They left quietly through the back door, probably for an Uber that Ted would pay for the next day with the corporate card. At 11:15 p.m., I was alone in my bedroom. The room I had shared with Ted for 40 years, but which now seemed to belong to a stranger. I grabbed my phone. I needed to talk to someone. I needed a friend. I called Diane. Diane had been my best friend for 20 years. We met at a book club in Naples when we both still pretended our marriages were perfect. Over time, we stopped pretending, at least with each other. Diane knew about every humiliation, every lonely night, every suspicion I had about Ted. And I knew about her problems with her husband, Richard, who left her for a secretary 10 years younger. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. Strange. Diane always answered my calls, even at 11 at night, even when she was sleeping. "Friendship has no schedule," she used to say. I tried again. Voicemail. I sent a message. "Diane, I need you. Something terrible happened. Call me when you can." The message was delivered, read at 11:22 p.m. But Diane didn't respond. I didn't know it yet, but there was a reason for Diane's silence. A reason that was just 1 floor away from me, in Ted's private office, where the smell of Cohiba cigars mingled with a perfume I knew very well. The jasmine perfume that Diane had worn since the day we met. The next 3 days were a blur of silence and slammed doors. Ted moved to the guest house behind the pool. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply packed a suitcase and walked out, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. Grace stayed with me the first night, sleeping in Lily's old room. She held my hand and said all the things daughters say when their mothers' hearts are breaking. "You deserve better. He's a monster. We're here for you." But Lucas didn't say a word. On the 4th day I found out why. I was in the kitchen making coffee. The same coffee I had made every morning for 40 years. In the same machine Ted bought in 2015 because he said the old one made the coffee taste like poverty. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lucas walked in. He was wearing a suit, which was unusual for a Tuesday morning. His art career had never required suits. His art career had never required much of anything, really, except my money. "Mom, we need to talk." I poured 2 cups, black for me, 2 sugars for him, the way he'd liked it since he was 16. "I'm listening." He didn't sit down. That should have been my first warning. "I talked to Dad. And I think you're overreacting." The coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. "Excuse me?" "Mom, come on. He came home with 2 women from a party. It doesn't mean anything. Dad has always been social. You know that. You've known that for 40 years. I set the cup down. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Social, is that what we're calling it now?" "I'm just saying maybe you shouldn't blow this out of proportion. Dad built an empire. He's under a lot of pressure. Sometimes men need to. Decompress." Decompress. I repeated the word like it was poison. "Lucas, he called us intruders, in our own home. He stepped on our wedding photo. He was drunk, Mom. People say things when they're drunk." I looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time in years. The expensive suit, the $400 haircut, the watch that cost more than my first car. all paid for by Ted, all paid for by the man who had just humiliated me in front of my children. Did your father tell you to say this? Lucas hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. He didn't have to tell me anything. I'm just trying to keep this family together. By defending the man who... By being realistic, Mom. His voice rose. You want a divorce? Fine. But you know what that means? It means lawyers. It means fighting over money. It means Dad cutting us all off. Is that what you want? For Grace and Lily to lose their inheritance? For me to lose everything I've built? Everything you've built? I laughed. I couldn't help it. Lucas, you've never built anything. You've never earned a single dollar that didn't come from your father's wallet, or mine. The words hit him like a slap. For a moment, I saw the little boy I had raised, the one who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard and call them special flowers. The one who cried when his goldfish died and made me hold a funeral in the garden. That boy was gone. I'm trying to help you, Mom, but if you want to destroy this family, that's on you. He left without drinking his coffee. That afternoon, Grace came over with a manila envelope. I found something, she said. Her face was pale. I didn't want to show you, but you need to see this. Inside the envelope was a receipt, Tiffany & Co., Palm Beach, dated March 15, 2022. Total $47,000. I found it in Dad's office, Grace explained, in a drawer he never locks. It's like he wanted someone to find it. I stared at the receipt. $47,000. For jewelry I had never received. There's a name, Grace said quietly, on the gift receipt. I looked closer, and there it was in elegant cursive. For Diane. Happy anniversary, anniversary. The word echoed in my head. Ted and Diane didn't have an anniversary. Ted and Diane weren't supposed to have anything, but they did. For 5 years, according to the dates on the other receipts Grace had found. 5 years of jewelry, hotel rooms, dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of. 5 years of my best friend sleeping with my husband while I told her my deepest secrets over lunch at Il Forno. 5 years of jasmine perfume in Ted's office that I had blamed on the cleaning lady. I thought about all the times Diane had comforted me. All the times she'd said, Ted doesn't deserve you. All the times she'd listened to me cry about feeling invisible in my own marriage, while she was the reason I felt that way. Mom. Grace's voice seemed far away. Mom, are you okay? I wasn't okay. I wasn't sure I would ever be okay again. But I knew one thing. I was done being the fool. Grace, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days, I need you to find me a lawyer, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Florida. Someone who isn't afraid of your father's money. Grace nodded. I know someone, a woman. She destroyed a hedge fund manager last year, left him with nothing but his golf clubs. Perfect. I looked at the receipt one more time. $47,000. That was more than I had spent on myself in the last decade combined. But it wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the betrayal, the lies, the 20 years of friendship that meant nothing, and it was about the fact that somewhere in this house there was more evidence, more secrets, more proof that the life I thought I had was nothing but a carefully constructed illusion. I was going to find every single piece of it, and then I was going to make them pay. The locksmith arrived on a Wednesday. I was at Grace's house when Lily called, her voice breaking. Mom, you need to come home, now. By the time I got there, it was already done. New locks on every door. A security guard I'd never seen standing at the entrance to my own home, and Ted standing on the porch with his arms crossed, watching me like I was a stray dog who'd wandered onto his property. You can't do this, I said. This is my home too. Was, Ted corrected. Was your home. My lawyers filed the paperwork this morning. Until the divorce is finalized, I have exclusive occupancy. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings. The guard will accompany you. 30 minutes. 40 years of marriage reduced to 30 minutes. I walked through the house I had decorated, maintained, and loved for 4 decades. The guard followed 2 steps behind, making sure I didn't take anything of value, as if my wedding china wasn't mine, as if the paintings I'd chosen weren't mine, as if any of it had ever been mine. I grabbed clothes, toiletries. The photo album Lily had saved from the floor that night, the one Ted had stepped on, and a small wooden box from my nightstand that contained my mother's rosary and a lock of hair from each of my children's first haircuts. "Time's up," the guard said. I looked around one last time. The white lilies were gone. The candles had been thrown away. The only trace of my surprise party was a faint stain on the marble floor where the cake had fallen during the fight. Ted didn't say goodbye. He just turned and walked back inside, closing the door on 40 years of my life. The apartment in Fort Myers was Ted's final insult. It was small, 500 square feet, maybe less. A cramped living room that doubled as a bedroom. A kitchen so tiny I could touch both walls if I stretched my arms. A bathroom with a shower that dribbled lukewarm water and a toilet that ran constantly. But the cruelest part wasn't the size. It was the layout. I recognized it the moment I walked in. The same floor plan as our first apartment in Chicago. The one we'd shared when Ted was just starting out, when we ate ramen noodles 3 times a week and dreamed about the empire we'd build together. He'd done it on purpose. He wanted me to remember what I'd given up for him. He wanted me to see how far I'd fallen. The rent was $100 a month. Ted's lawyer had arranged for a temporary spousal support of $3,500, barely enough to cover rent, food, and utilities. No car, no credit cards, no access to the joint accounts I had helped build for 40 years. I sat on the thin mattress that came with the furnished apartment and listened to the traffic on US 41, the constant roar of cars, the honking, the rumble of trucks heading to who knows where. This was my life now. This tiny box that smelled of mold and pine sol. This was what 40 years of sacrifice had earned me. Lily came to visit on the 3rd day. She brought groceries. Real groceries, not the canned soup I'd been eating, and a determination in her eyes that reminded me of myself at her age. "I want to give you my college fund," she said. "Absolutely not. Mom, it's $48,000. You could use it to—" "Lily," I took her hands, "that money is for your future. Your father doesn't get to take that from you, too. But you have nothing. I have you, and Grace. That's more than nothing." She started crying then, my baby girl, 24 years old, sobbing in this awful apartment because her father had turned into a monster and her mother had nowhere else to go. I held her like I used to when she was small. When a kiss on the forehead could fix anything. When the world was simple and fathers were heroes and mothers were invincible. "I'm going to be okay," I whispered. "I promise." I wasn't sure if I believed it, but I needed her to. That night, alone in the dark, I thought about who I used to be. Olivia Bennett, 23 years old, top of her class at Ohio State, a teaching career ahead of her. A master's degree half finished. A life full of possibilities. I'd given it all up for a man who now thought I was worth $3,500 a month and a 500 square foot apartment that smelled like someone else's failures. I thought about the woman I'd become. Olivia Crawford, the billionaire's wife, the hostess. The smile in the photographs, the invisible woman who made everything run smoothly while her husband took all the credit. I hated her. I hated her weakness, her silence, her willingness to look the other way for 40 years because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. But somewhere inside me, buried under decades of submission, there was still a spark of the woman I used to be. The woman who had dreams, the woman who didn't need a man to define her worth. I was going to find her again, and when I did, Ted Crawford was going to regret ever underestimating me. On the 7th day, Grace called with news. "The lawyer I told you about, she wants to meet you. Tomorrow. Her name is Patricia Vance, and she says she's very interested in your case." Interested how? Interested in the making Ted Crawford pay kind of way. Apparently, she's heard stories about him. She's been waiting for someone brave enough to take him on. Brave. I almost laughed. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken, humiliated, and alone in an apartment that mocked everything I'd lost. But I also felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Real, burning, righteous anger. "Tell her I'll be there," I said. I hung up and looked around my tiny apartment. The water-stained ceiling, the carpet that had seen better decades, the window that looked out onto a parking lot full of cars that cost less than Ted's watches. This was rock bottom. This was as low as I could go, which meant there was only one direction left. Up. Patricia Vance's office was on the 34th floor of a glass tower in downtown Miami. The kind of building where the elevators played classical music and the receptionists looked like they'd walked off a magazine cover. I felt out of place in my Target blouse and clearance rack slacks. The shoes I was wearing had a small hole near the toe that I'd covered with a black marker. This was my life now, covering holes with markers and pretending I still belonged in rooms like this. But Patricia didn't seem to notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. Mrs. Crawford. She shook my hand firmly. Mid-50s, silver hair cut sharp at the jaw, eyes like a hawk sizing up prey. Her handshake was the kind that meant business. No nonsense, no wasted motion. I've been waiting for someone like you for a long time. Someone like me? Someone willing to take on Ted Crawford. She gestured for me to sit in a leather chair that probably cost more than 3 months of my Fort Myers rent. Your husband has a reputation in this town, ruthless in business, untouchable in court. 3 women have tried to divorce him before you. I blinked. 3? He was only married once before me, to Helen. She died in 1990. Patricia smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew secrets and enjoyed revealing them at precisely the right moment. Officially, yes. 1 marriage before you. But there were 2 other women during your marriage who started divorce proceedings and then withdrew, exposed affairs that Ted managed to bury. Both settled out of court for pennies on the dollar. Both signed NDAs so airtight they can't even confirm Ted's middle name without risking a lawsuit. Both disappeared from Florida entirely. What happened to them? Ted happened to them. Patricia leaned back in her chair. He has a team of lawyers whose only job is to make problems go away. 7 attorneys on retainer, billing $800 an hour each, whose sole purpose is to bury people in paperwork. Depositions, motions, counter-motions. Discovery request for every receipt you've ever signed. They drain resources. They threaten families. They dig up every embarrassing moment from your past and make sure it ends up in the press. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. One of the women, I won't say her name, had a DUI from 20 years ago. Minor thing. Nobody was hurt, but Ted's team leaked it to every newspaper in Florida. Made her look like an unstable alcoholic. Her own children started questioning her judgment. She settled for $200,000 and moved to Oregon. My stomach turned. And the other one? Her brother had some tax issues. Nothing criminal, just sloppy bookkeeping. By the time Ted's lawyers were done, the IRS was auditing his entire family. She gave up after 6 months. I sat in silence, processing. This was the man I had slept next to for 40 years. The man I had trusted with my life, my children, my future. And he had destroyed women for daring to leave him. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Are you trying to scare me off? The opposite. Patricia leaned forward, her hawk eyes gleaming. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're up against. And because I want you to know that I've been studying Ted Crawford for 12 years. 12 years, Mrs. Crawford, waiting for the right case, the right client, someone with enough ammunition to actually win. And you think that's me? I know it is. She slid a folder across her desk, because I found something his other victims didn't have. The folder contained a copy of my prenuptial agreement, the same document I'd signed 31 years ago in Ted's lawyer's office, while Ted held my hand and told me it was just a formality. I was 24 years old, in love, certain I would never need a prenup because Ted and I would be together forever. His lawyer had rushed me through the pages, pointing to signature lines, telling me not to worry about the details. And I didn't. I signed wherever he pointed and never read a single word. Turn to page 47, Patricia said. Section 14, paragraph 3. I found the section. The language was dense, full of legal jargon that blurred together. But Patricia had highlighted one passage in yellow. In the event of proven marital infidelity by either party, the injured spouse shall be entitled to 60% of all marital assets accumulated during the marriage, superseding all other distribution clauses contained herein. I read it twice, 3 times. 60%, I whispered. 60% of everything. Not 50. 60. Patricia's voice was calm, but I could hear the triumph underneath. Ted was so confident that you would never find out about his affairs, or that you'd be too scared to act on them, that he signed a contract guaranteeing your victory. His own arrogance is going to destroy him. 60% of $380 million. That was $228 million. More money than I could comprehend. More than I would ever need. But I need proof, I said. Real proof. Not just receipts from jewelry stores. That's where it gets interesting. Patricia pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. I have a private investigator, the best in Florida. He's been building a file on Ted for 3 years. Pro bono, I might add, because he has his own reasons for wanting to see Ted Crawford brought down. She opened the folder and spread the contents across her desk. Your friend Diane. She's been receiving monthly payments from a shell company called Jasmine Holdings LLC. $15,000 a month, deposited like clockwork on the first of every month for the past 5 years. That's $900,000, Mrs. Crawford. The company is registered in the Cayman Islands, but the beneficial owner, traced through 4 layers of corporate structures, is Ted's personal accountant, Martin Reeves. Jasmine Holdings. Like her perfume, Ted didn't even bother to be subtle. There's more. Patricia laid out photographs, hotel check-in records, flight manifests, credit card statements. The Ritz-Carlton in Palm Beach, the Four Seasons in Orlando, a private villa in the Bahamas that Ted supposedly uses for business retreats. Your husband has been very careless, Mrs. Crawford, or very arrogant. Based on what I know about him, probably both. I looked through the pages. Dates and times, room numbers, itemized charges for champagne and room service and couples massages. 5 years of betrayal documented in black and white, so thoroughly that it would take a jury about 30 seconds to reach a verdict. But then I saw something that made me stop. A name on one of the documents. A name I didn't recognize. Helen Crawford. Who is this? I pointed to the name. Ted's first wife was named Helen, but she died in 1990, before I even met him. Patricia's expression shifted. Something between satisfaction and sympathy. That's the other thing I need to tell you, Mrs. Crawford. Perhaps the most important thing. She pulled out one final document. A photograph of a silver-haired woman standing in front of a modest house. Ted's first wife, Helen, the woman who supposedly died in a car accident 33 years ago. Supposedly? She's alive, living in Sarasota under the name Helen Mitchell. My investigator found her last week. She's 60 years old, healthy, and very much not dead. The room started spinning. I gripped the arms of my chair to steady myself. Ted had told me Helen died in a car accident on I-75. A drunk driver, he said, killed instantly. He'd shown me her death certificate. I remembered the document, the official seal, the cause of death typed in cold bureaucratic language. He'd taken me to her grave at a cemetery in Tampa. He'd cried at that grave on the anniversary of her death every year for the first decade of our marriage. That's impossible, I whispered. I saw her death certificate. I visited her grave. The death certificate was forged. The grave is empty. Or rather, it contains someone else's remains. A Jane Doe from a morgue in Georgia who was never identified. Patricia's voice was gentle now. Ted paid Helen $12 million to disappear. He faked her death. Created a whole new identity for her. She's been living 45 minutes away from you for over 30 years. But why? Why would he do that? Because Helen knew things. Things about how Ted really made his first fortune. Things that could destroy him if they ever became public. Patricia closed the folder. She wouldn't tell my investigator what those things were, but she said she'd be willing to talk to you. Woman to woman. Wife to wife. I drove to Sarasota the next afternoon. The GPS took me to a quiet street in a middle-class neighborhood. Ranch houses with neat lawns. American flags hanging from porches. The kind of place where people waved to their neighbors and knew each other's names. Helen Mitchell's house was pale yellow with white shutters. A garden full of roses bloomed in the front yard. Red, pink, white, yellow. She was kneeling in the dirt when I pulled up, wearing gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. She looked up as I approached. Silver hair. Tired eyes. The kind of face that had seen too much and learned to hide it behind a pleasant smile. "You must be Olivia," she said. "I've been expecting you." "You knew I was coming." "I knew someone would come eventually." She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "Ted always finds another one, another woman who believes his lies, another woman who thinks she's special." She looked at me with something like pity. "How long were you married?" 40 years. Helen let out a low whistle. That's longer than I expected. He must have gotten better at hiding things. She gestured toward the house. Come inside. I'll make tea, and then I'll tell you everything. Her living room was modest but comfortable. Floral couch, family photos on the walls, but no photos of Ted, I noticed. A cat sleeping in a patch of sunlight. Helen handed me a cup of tea and sat across from me. I was married to Ted for 7 years, she began. I was 19 when we met. He was charming, ambitious, made me feel like the center of the universe. You know the feeling. I nodded. I knew it exactly. The first few years were good, or I thought they were. Then I started noticing things. Money coming from places I couldn't explain. Late-night phone calls he wouldn't tell me about. Business partners who looked more like criminals than businessmen. She paused, staring into her tea. In 1989, I found a briefcase in his office. It was locked, but I knew where he kept the key. Inside there were documents, deeds to properties I'd never heard of, bank statements from accounts in other countries, and photos. Photos of what? Of a warehouse fire in Jacksonville, 1987. 3 people died in that fire. A security guard and 2 homeless men who had been sleeping inside. The official cause was faulty wiring, but the photos in Ted's briefcase. She shook her head. They were taken before the fire started, and Ted was in them, standing outside the warehouse, smiling. My blood ran cold. Are you saying Ted? I'm saying the warehouse was insured for $4 million, and I'm saying Ted collected every penny. I'm saying 3 people died so he could make his first real fortune. Helen set down her cup. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just looked at me with those cold eyes and said, Helen, you have 2 choices. You can take $12 million and disappear, or you can stay and see what happens to people who threaten me. So you disappeared. I was 26 years old. I was terrified. And honestly, she laughed bitterly, $12 million was more money than I'd ever dreamed of. So I took it. I let him fake my death. I moved here, changed my name, started over. And I've spent 33 years wondering if I made the right choice. I sat in silence, trying to process what I'd just heard. The man I had married, the father of my children. A murderer? Do you have any proof? I finally asked. The photos? The documents? Helen shook her head. Ted took everything, but there might still be copies. He's paranoid. He keeps records of everything, just in case someone tries to betray him. Somewhere in that mansion, there's a safe or a hiding spot with every secret he's ever wanted to bury. I thought about the mansion, the house I'd lived in for decades, the office I was never allowed to enter, the drawer that always stayed locked. I know where to look, I said. Helen reached across and took my hand. Be careful, Olivia. Ted is more dangerous than you know. If he finds out what you're doing. He won't find out. I squeezed her hand. Not until it's too late. That night I sat in my cramped apartment and made a decision. I removed my wedding ring, the 3-carat diamond that Ted had given me 31 years ago, and placed it on the kitchen counter. I stared at it for a long time. All those years, all those lies, all that wasted love. Tomorrow I would sell it, and with the money I would hire Patricia's investigator to help me find whatever Ted was hiding. The ring was worth about $45,000. Ted had told me that when he gave it to me, proud of how much he'd spent. At the time, I thought it meant he loved me. Now I knew it just meant he liked to own things. Well, he didn't own me anymore. The plan was simple, maybe too simple. Every Thursday night, Ted played poker with his business partners at a private club in Naples. He'd been doing it for 20 years, one of the few routines he never broke. He'd leave at 7, return after midnight, and spend the hours in between drinking scotch and pretending he was still the king of the world. That gave me 5 hours. Grace had kept her key to the mansion. Ted had changed the locks on the main doors, but he'd forgotten about the service entrance near the pool house, the one the cleaning staff used. Grace's key still worked. Are you sure about this? She asked as we sat in her car parked 2 blocks from the house. If Dad catches you... He won't catch me. He's predictable, he's arrogant, and he thinks I'm too broken to fight back. Grace squeezed my hand. I'll keep watch. If I see his car, I'll call you immediately. I nodded and stepped out into the warm Florida night. The walk to the mansion felt longer than I remembered. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every rustle of palm fronds made my heart skip. I was 55 years old, sneaking into my own home like a thief, looking for evidence that my husband was a monster. The service entrance was exactly where I remembered it. The key turned smoothly. The door opened without a sound. I was in. The mansion was dark, except for the security lights that cast long shadows across the marble floors. I knew this house better than anyone. Every corner, every creaky floorboard, every hiding spot. I had lived here for 35 years. I had raised my children here. I had loved and suffered and survived here. Now I was going to find the truth. Ted's office was on the second floor, at the end of a long hallway lined with paintings I had chosen and he had taken credit for. The door was locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key. Taped to the underside of a decorative table in the hallway. Some things never changed. The office smelled like him, Cohiba, cigars, and expensive cologne, and the faint mustiness of old books he'd never read. I turned on my phone's flashlight and began to search. The desk drawers were mostly empty, cleared out, probably by his lawyers. The filing cabinet contained nothing but old tax returns and business contracts. I was starting to lose hope when I remembered what Helen had said. He's paranoid. He keeps records of everything. I looked around the room with new eyes. Where would Ted hide something he never wanted anyone to find? The Basquiat painting, the fake one he'd bought at an auction and bragged about for years, not realizing it was a forgery until an art dealer embarrassed him at a dinner party. He'd kept it anyway, out of spite, hanging it in his private office where no one could mock him. I walked to the painting and lifted it off the wall. Behind it was a safe, small, built into the wall, with a digital keypad. My heart sank. I didn't know the combination. I could try birthdays, anniversaries, but Ted was too paranoid for something that obvious. I'd have to... Wait, I knew Ted. I knew his ego, his vanity, his obsession with his own success. I typed in the date Crawford Realty Group was founded, March 15th, 2005. 03152-005. The safe clicked open. Inside, I found exactly what Helen had described. A thick folder of documents, photographs, bank statements, and a black USB drive that looked like it had never been touched. I didn't have time to read everything. I photographed each page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly that some of the images came out blurred. I'd have to sort through them later. Right now, I just needed to get out. But as I was putting the documents back, one envelope caught my eye. It was newer than the others, crisp white paper, no dust. The handwriting on the front was Ted's. For Martin, in case of my death. Martin Reeves, Ted's accountant. The man whose name was on Jasmine Holdings. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a list of names and numbers, bank accounts in the Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore, and at the bottom, a paragraph that made my blood run cold. The following assets are to be distributed upon my death. 60% to Diane Mitchell, Jasmine Holdings beneficiary. 25% to Charles Crawford, Jr., son, born 2021, mother Brittany Lawson. 15% to charitable foundation. Tax purposes. My children from my marriage to Olivia Crawford are specifically and intentionally excluded from this distribution. I read it 3 times. Charles Crawford, Jr., born 2021. Son. Ted had another child, a son, with someone named Brittany Lawson. And he had written Grace, Lucas, and Lily out of his will entirely. I was still staring at the paper when my phone buzzed. Grace. Dad's car just turned onto the street. Get out now. I shoved everything back into the safe, closed it, and replaced the painting. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I ran down the hallway, down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the service entrance. I made it to Grace's car just as Ted's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Drive, I gasped. Just drive. Grace floored it. We didn't speak until we were 3 miles away. Did you find anything? She finally asked. I looked at my phone, at the dozens of photographs I'd taken, at the evidence that would destroy Ted Crawford. I found everything, and the next morning I called a family meeting. Not at my apartment. It was too small, and I didn't want Ted to know where I lived. We met at Grace's house in Bonita Springs. Grace, Lily, and Lucas sitting in the living room, While I stood by the window trying to find the words, Lucas had come reluctantly. He'd barely spoken to me since our fight in the kitchen. But Grace had insisted, and Lucas had never been able to say no to his older sister. "I need to show you something," I said, "and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that?" Grace and Lily nodded. Lucas crossed his arms but didn't object. I connected my phone to Grace's TV and began showing them the photographs, the bank statements, the shell companies, the payments to Diane, the evidence of Ted's affair laid out in excruciating detail. Lucas shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Then I showed them the letter, the one addressed to Martin Reeves, the one that cut all three of them out of their father's will. The room went silent. "This has to be fake," Lucas finally said. His voice was hoarse. "Dad wouldn't. He would never. There's more." I pulled up the photograph of the final page. "Charles Crawford Jr., born 2021. Mother, Brittany Lawson. Your father has another son. He's been hiding him for 3 years. Lily started crying quietly. Grace put her arm around her sister, her face pale but controlled. Lucas stood up abruptly. No, this is bullshit. You fabricated this. You're trying to turn us against him because you're angry about the divorce. Lucas, you've always been jealous of Dad's success. You've always resented that he built something while you just sat there, and now you're making up lies to—" "I'm not making up lies," I hadn't meant to shout. But something inside me snapped. 40 years of silence, 40 years of swallowing my pride, my pain, my anger. It all came pouring out. I gave up everything for your father, my career, my dreams, my identity. I spent 40 years being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect hostess. And what did I get? Humiliation, betrayal, and a husband who was planning to leave everything, to his mistress and his secret child, while his own children got nothing. Lucas's face had gone white. I found this in his safe, Lucas. In his own office, in his own handwriting. I didn't fabricate anything. Your father did this. Your father planned this. And if you don't believe me, you can ask him yourself. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Lucas pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Grace asked. "I'm calling Dad." The conversation lasted 12 minutes. We couldn't hear what Ted was saying, but we could see Lucas's face. The way it shifted from defiance to confusion to disbelief to something that looked like his whole world was crumbling. When he hung up, he didn't speak for almost a minute. He just stood there, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. "He didn't deny it," Lucas finally said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I asked him about the will, about the other kid, about Diane, and he didn't deny any of it." "What did he say?" Lily asked. Lucas laughed. It was the most painful sound I'd ever heard. "He said I was weak. He said I was just like my mother. He said if I couldn't understand that a man needs to protect his legacy with someone who deserves it, then I was never really his son anyway." He looked at me, and for the first time in months I saw my little boy again, the one who brought me dandelions, the one who cried at his goldfish's funeral, the one I thought I'd lost forever. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." I crossed the room and pulled him into my arms. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, even though it wasn't, even though nothing was okay. "We're going to get through this, together." That night, Lucas gave me something, a USB drive, different from the one in Ted's safe. "I found this in Dad's desk 6 months ago," he said. "I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just business stuff. But now..." I plugged it into my laptop. The drive contained emails, hundreds of them, correspondence between Ted and Martin Reeves going back 15 years, and buried in the middle, a thread from 2019 that made my heart stop. Ted had instructed Martin to create a contingency plan in case Lucas ever became a problem. The plan involved fabricating evidence that Lucas had committed fraud, altering documents, backdating signatures, and using it to destroy his career and his credibility if he ever sided against Ted. He was going to frame me, Lucas said, his voice hollow. My own father was going to frame me for a crime I didn't commit, just in case I didn't do what he wanted. I closed the laptop. "Not anymore," I said. "Now we have everything we need." Tomorrow I would call Patricia Vance. Tomorrow, we would begin the process of dismantling Ted Crawford's empire. But tonight, I held my son and let him cry. And for the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. Patricia Vance called it the nuclear option. 3 weeks after I handed her the evidence from Ted's safe, she filed for divorce on my behalf with a 47-page complaint that read like a criminal indictment: infidelity, hidden assets, fraudulent concealment, breach of fiduciary duty, and attached as exhibits every photograph, every bank statement, every damning document I had photographed in Ted's office. The prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause was invoked on page 1. 60% of $380 million. That was my legal right, but Patricia wanted more. We're not just going to take his money, she told me in her office, spreading documents across her desk like a general planning a war. We're going to dismantle his reputation, his business relationships, his sense of invincibility. By the time we're done, Ted Crawford won't be able to get a table at Applebee's, let alone close a real estate deal in this state. I should have felt guilty. Maybe the old Olivia would have. The Olivia who spent 40 years keeping the peace, smoothing over conflicts, making excuses for a man who didn't deserve them. But that Olivia was dead. She had died in a cramped apartment in Fort Myers, surrounded by the smell of mold and the sound of traffic, staring at a water-stained ceiling and wondering how she had wasted her entire life. The woman who emerged from that apartment was someone new, someone harder, someone who had finally learned that kindness without boundaries is just another word for self-destruction. Do it, I said. All of it. Ted's response was predictable. He hired a team of 7 lawyers, the same team Patricia had warned me about. They filed motion after motion, trying to delay, to obfuscate, to bury us in paperwork. They demanded depositions from everyone I had ever known. They subpoenaed my medical records, my bank statements, my emails going back 20 years. They even tried to depose Helen Mitchell. That was a mistake. Helen, it turned out, had been waiting 33 years for a chance to tell her story. When Ted's lawyers showed up at her door with a subpoena, she didn't hide. She didn't run. She smiled, invited them in for tea, and then spent 4 hours on the record describing exactly how Ted had built his empire. The warehouse fire in Jacksonville. The insurance fraud. The 3 people who died so Ted could collect $4 million. She couldn't prove it. The evidence was long gone. But her testimony was enough to make Ted's lawyers very, very nervous. Suddenly, the delays stopped. The motions were withdrawn. Ted's lead attorney called Patricia to discuss a reasonable settlement. He's scared, Patricia told me. For the first time in his life, Ted Crawford is genuinely scared. Good. The settlement negotiations took place in a conference room on the 40th floor of a Miami high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. A mahogany table that probably cost more than my apartment. And at the far end, sitting between his lawyers like a king on a crumbling throne, Ted. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. The arrogance was still there, but it was brittle now, like a mask that didn't quite fit anymore. He didn't look at me when I walked in. He stared at the table, his jaw tight, his hands clasped in front of him. I sat across from him. Patricia on my left, Grace, Lucas, and Lily behind me. A united front for the first time in months. Let's make this quick, Ted's lawyer said. My client is prepared to offer Mrs. Crawford a settlement of $95 million plus the Naples residence plus ongoing spousal support of... No. The word came from me. Everyone turned. No? Ted's lawyer raised an eyebrow. $95 million is an extremely generous... I don't want the Naples residence. I kept my voice steady. I don't want anything that reminds me of him. I want the $95 million in liquid assets. I want full ownership of the property in Bonita Springs that was purchased with marital funds. And I want the apartment in Fort Myers. Ted finally looked up. The apartment? That dump? Why would you... Because I have plans for it. He stared at me, trying to read my expression. I gave him nothing. Patricia smiled. I think we can work with that. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in April. I signed the papers in Patricia's office, with Grace and Lily as witnesses. Lucas was there too, standing by the window, looking out at the Miami skyline. He had been quiet for weeks. Processing, I think. Trying to reconcile the father he thought he knew with the monster he had discovered. How do you feel? Grace asked as I set down the pen. I thought about it. For 40 years I had been Olivia Crawford, Ted's wife, the billionaire's accessory, the woman who smiled in photographs and pretended everything was fine. Now I was just Olivia. No title, no role, no one's wife, no one's property. It was terrifying and exhilarating and sad all at once. I feel free, I said. For the first time in 40 years, I feel free. The karma came swiftly, and it came for everyone. Ted's business partners began distancing themselves within days of the divorce filing. The documents I had found, the shell companies, the hidden assets, the payments to Diane, suggested a pattern of financial misconduct that made investors very nervous. 3 major deals fell through in the first month. By the end of the second month, Crawford Realty Group was hemorrhaging money. Ted tried to salvage things. He gave interviews to business magazines claiming he was the victim of a vindictive ex-wife and her fraudulent allegations. But the damage was done. His reputation, the thing he had valued above everything, including his family, was in tatters. The IRS opened an investigation in June, something about unreported foreign accounts. Ted's lawyers were confident they could make it go away, but confidence cost money, and Ted's money was running out faster than anyone expected. As for Diane, her karma was more personal. When Ted's assets were frozen during the divorce proceedings, the monthly payments to Jasmine Holdings stopped. Diane, who had grown accustomed to her $15,000 allowance, suddenly found herself with nothing. No income, no savings. She had spent everything Ted gave her on clothes and vacations and a lifestyle she couldn't sustain. And then came the final blow. Ted, desperate to cut costs, ended their relationship with a 3-line text message. No explanation. No gratitude for 5 years of lies and betrayal. Just, "It's over. Don't contact me again. Good luck." Diane called him 17 times that day. He never answered. She called me once too. I didn't answer either, but I did send her something, the lease for the apartment in Fort Myers, the same 500-square-foot box where Ted had banished me. The same water-stained ceiling, the same smell of mold, the same window overlooking a parking lot. I had bought it specifically for this purpose. The note I attached was simple. "I thought you might need a place to stay. Consider it a gift from an old friend." I never heard from her again. Brittany Lawson appeared at my door in July. I was living in Bonita Springs by then, in a modest house I had bought with my settlement money. Nothing extravagant, just 3 bedrooms, a small garden, and a porch, where I could drink my coffee and watch the sunrise. She was younger than I expected, 28, with tired eyes and a toddler on her hip. Charles Crawford Jr., Charlie, she called him, had Ted's chin and his dark hair. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Brittany said before I could speak. I needed to talk to someone who understands." I invited her in. Over coffee, she told me her story. She had been Ted's secretary for 2 years before the affair started. He had promised her everything: marriage, security, a future for their son. She had believed him the same way I had believed him 40 years ago. "He told me you were crazy," she said, staring into her cup. "He said you were unstable, jealous, that you made his life miserable. I believed him. I believed everything." "I know," I said. "I believed him too. He hasn't called in 3 months. He hasn't sent money for Charlie. His lawyers sent a letter last week saying he's contesting paternity." She laughed bitterly. Contesting paternity for a child that looks exactly like him. I looked at Charlie, playing on the floor with the set of blocks Lily had left behind. He was innocent in all this. A child caught in the wreckage of his father's lies. "What do you need?" I asked. Brittany looked up, surprised. "What? What do you need? Money? A lawyer? A place to stay while you figure things out? Why would you help me? I was the other woman. I was part of the reason my marriage was broken long before you came along." I reached across and took her hand. "Ted is very good at making women believe they're special. That's not your fault, and that little boy deserves better than a father who abandons him." Brittany started crying. I let her. By the end of the afternoon, I had connected her with Patricia Vance, who was more than happy to take on another case against Ted Crawford, and offered her the guest room until she found her footing. She stayed for 3 weeks. When she left, she hugged me at the door and said, "I don't understand you. After everything, you should hate me." "I spent 40 years hating myself," I said. I don't have room for hating anyone else. The letter from Helen arrived in September. I recognized the handwriting from the documents in Ted's safe. The same careful, precise script. Inside was a single page. Dear Olivia, I've been following the news. You did what I was too afraid to do 33 years ago. You stood up to him. You won. I want you to know that I've decided to come forward. There's a journalist at the Miami Herald who's been investigating Ted for years. I'm going to tell her everything. About the warehouse fire, about the money, about all of it. I don't have proof anymore, but I have my testimony. Maybe that will be enough. Ted is going to try to destroy me for this. I know that. But I'm 60 years old, and I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending I don't know what he did. I'm tired of being afraid. You gave me the courage to do this. I hope you know that. With gratitude and admiration, Helen. I read the letter 3 times. Then I picked up the phone and called Helen's number. I'm coming to Sarasota, I said when she answered. We should talk. There are things you need to know before you go to that journalist. What kind of things? I thought about the USB drive Lucas had given me, the emails about the contingency plan, the evidence that Ted had been planning to frame his own son, the kind of things that will make sure Ted Crawford never hurts anyone again. I sold my wedding ring in October. The jeweler gave me $42,000 for it. Less than Ted had paid, but more than I expected. I donated the money to a shelter for domestic abuse survivors in Naples. I asked them not to use my name. The ring had meant something once. Love, commitment, forever. Now it was just a piece of carbon, shaped by pressure and heat into something that sparkled, beautiful on the surface, empty underneath, like my marriage, like Ted. I walked out of the jewelry store and into the bright Florida sunshine. For a moment, I just stood there, feeling the warmth on my face, listening to the sounds of traffic and seagulls and life happening all around me. I thought about the woman I used to be. Olivia Bennett, 23 years old, full of dreams. Olivia Crawford, 55 years old, full of regrets. And now? Now I was just Olivia, 56 years old, divorced, scarred, but alive. Still alive. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. Mom, we're all coming for dinner tonight. Lily's bringing dessert. Lucas says he'll grill. Is that okay? I smiled. A real smile, the kind I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Perfect, I typed back. I'll be home. Home. Such a small word for such a complicated thing. For 40 years, I thought home was a mansion in Naples, with marble floors and expensive art and a husband who didn't love me. Now I knew better. Home was a modest house in Bonita Springs with a garden that needed weeding. Home was dinner with my children, laughter around a table, the sound of Lucas and Grace arguing about football while Lily rolled her eyes. Home was the quiet moments after everyone left, sitting on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the stars come out one by one. Home was wherever I chose to be, wherever I was loved, wherever I was free. Ted Crawford had taken 40 years of my life. He had taken my career, my identity, my sense of self. He had humiliated me, betrayed me, and tried to destroy me. But he hadn't won. I had, and tomorrow I was going to wake up in my own bed, in my own house, and start another day of the life I had finally chosen for myself. Whatever came next. Helen's testimony, the journalist's investigation, Ted's ongoing attempts to salvage his reputation, I would face it. Not alone, but with my children beside me, with the truth on my side, with the knowledge that I had survived the worst and come out stronger. The phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick it up. Mrs. Crawford? A woman's voice, professional but warm. My name is Jennifer Reyes. I'm an investigative journalist with the Miami Herald. Helen Mitchell gave me your number. I'm writing a story about Ted Crawford, and I was hoping you might be willing to talk. I looked out at the sunset, orange and pink and gold, spreading across the sky like a promise. Yes, I said. I'm willing to talk. Some stories need to be told. Some truths need to see the light. And mine was just beginning. Final notes. If you were Olivia, what would you have done? Would you have fought back the same way, or taken a different path? Do you have your own story of betrayal and redemption? Send it to our channel. Your experience might inspire someone else who's going through the same thing. Thank you for listening.